Hi everyone, this is Cody, and today I'm going to be taking a little bit of a break from my usual videos, and I'm going to be showing you how I brew a simple 1 gallon batch of beer. Now there are a lot of ways you can go about this, and some of them can actually be pretty complicated, especially if you're starting out. So this recipe is very simple, very easy to do, and you just need a few things. You'll need your fermenter, and you'll also need measuring spoons, a measuring cup, funnel, and some simple ingredients. So I got the barley malt, which is typical of most beers. It's a pretty important ingredient. But some beers can be made without it, but it's actually, most beers have some sort of barley malt in it. So this is already malted, and it's very syrupy like so, using that. And this is actually going to be using buckwheat honey instead of priming sugar. So the good thing I could see about this buckwheat honey, I haven't actually technically used it before in my own brews, but I think this will work good because it actually has a lot of similar tastes to barley malt. It's actually a very thick, kind of a dark honey, which actually has a very similar consistency to this barley malt. And so it actually has similar, very similar taste to it, like in a lot of ways. Like it obviously tastes like honey, but I think it'll go good with the malts, like in this beer. So also you need your hops. So I got 14 grams of dried hops. Just got these hops at the health food store, and you can get like a huge bag of them for like $25. And so this is only 14 grams. So this will probably make pretty strong hop brew, maybe like a bit of an IPA. You could obviously go more or less, but I think this, I found the sweet spot with this 14 grams. And also your yeast, of course, which is very important, because otherwise you won't get an alcoholic beer. And this is 3 grams of yeast. I measured it out on a little scale. And you'll probably need a scale if you're doing this, or you could just do it by hand. So imagine this would probably equal out to maybe half a teaspoon, maybe a little more. And anyways, this isn't actually brewing yeast. I'm just using regular baker's yeast, which can be used for bread, making bread, but I've used this before in brews and it's worked just fine. So I found 3 grams is probably the best place to start. A little less, you probably won't get a very strong brew, and a little more, it'd probably be too strong and it might actually start to overflow in the bubbling process. So without further ado, let's get started. The first things first is cleanliness. Cleanliness, cleanliness, cleanliness. So always disinfect your fermenter when you're doing any kind of brew, because you can get contamination if you don't. And contamination won't necessarily make you sick if you drink the beer. It would just make your beer not taste very good. Same with wine or any kind of alcoholic drink you're making, for that matter. Speed it up for you there. Okay, that should be good. And also clean your airlock, that's important. And just use a little bit of soap with that. Just a drop. Should be good. Okay. Alright, so this recipe calls for about a pound of barley malt. And this jar comes in 566 grams, so that's just over a pound. But I did use some of this already. I didn't brew beer with it, but I just ate it just like as a dietary supplement, because you can do that actually. It tastes really good. I put it in my tea sometimes just for sweeten up my tea. So it's like a type of sugar. It's like a natural kind of a sugar. So that's what the yeast uses to ferment when it's brewing, as well as your priming sugar. Some people don't even use priming sugar, they just use the barley malt. I believe, I could be wrong. But so I'm just going to probably use it all, because I'm not sure exactly how much I have, but I would probably guesstimate around a cup of this stuff, if I have that much. It's a very molasses-like consistency, very slow. Probably going to have enough, but I think I'll need to grab a spoon now and then just scoop it out. Alright, so I got about just over 3/4 of a cup. Should be good enough, especially since I will be adding the buckwheat honey, which is a similar consistency and similar flavor. And so I might just add a little more of the buckwheat honey just to kind of compensate for not enough of this. Yep. Stuff tastes really good actually. Kind of like molasses. Actually a lot like molasses. Very sweet. It's a reason why they use it in brewing beer. Okay, I think that's good enough. And now I think it's time to add the hops. So there's no really set rules of how you get them in. Like a lot of people boil their hops first and then add the liquid. But I'm just going to add this straight dry hop right into here. And then it can infuse with the beer as it's fermenting, just like you're making a tea, and I think that'll ultimately make it stronger and maybe a little better tasting. So this can get messy too, but that's okay. Not here to not make a mess, we're here to brew beer. It's okay if you get a little on the sides, I guess, but matters is you get the bulk of the hops in there. Just kind of stuff them in there. There's a lot of pollen in with this hops, natural pollen from the hops. That's great to have in your beer. Okay. So there's the barley and there's the hops. And now add the water. And usually it's a good idea to do slightly lukewarm water, not hot water, that can kill the yeast, but not cold water, otherwise it wouldn't start to ferment. So we've got to find that balance. I think I'll let it warm up a little bit more before I add the rest. Not too hot, not too cold. Just right. Probably about here is good. Okay, so this is starting to get to like the color of beer already, so that's good. See how that mess just disappeared? Like magic. Okay, so the general rule of thumb when you're brewing a 1 gallon batch of beer is to use 1/5 of a cup of honey. Usually if you're doing a 5 gallon batch, you'd use a whole cup of honey kind of thing. But I'm going to use a 1/4 cup of honey because I didn't have as much barley malt, so I kind of want to compensate. Even do a little bit more, maybe like even up to 1/3 of a cup. We'll see. Okay, it's already at 1/3 of a cup, so it's not as thick as barley malt, but it's a dark color like barley malt. Definitely sweeter, like honey. Like it is honey, that's what it is, but this has the same kind of similar flavor, I would say. I'm going to add this honey into here. So this would be being used in place of priming sugar. So if you wanted to, you can use regular sugar. I've used sugar before. Can't remember off the top of my head how much I've used. I think you would use more sugar than you would honey because honey's more concentrated. And finally, we add our yeast. There we go. Now, it's just a matter of putting this thing back on. Down there good. Swirl it a little more just so the yeast kind of gets mixed in with the brew there. And now, fermentation process has officially begun. So, here, gotta fill this with water. So you fill this up about halfway, just so the bottom part gets covered, has enough room to bubble and the thing to bob up and down. This on here. Just in there good. Your cap. One last rinse. There you go. So now what's going to happen is the yeast will start to eat the sugars from the priming sugar and the barley malt, and it will ferment, and when that happens, alcohol is produced. And once that's done, I'm going to filter it through a cheesecloth and then bottle it up. And I'll actually have these little carbonation drops. They actually look like little cough drops, but they're basically just kind of a sugar mixture that you add to your bottles so that pressure can build up a little more and then your beer gets carbonated. So probably within the first day we will see bubbles coming up, and this thing will be bubbling while the gas is escaping. And it'll be bobbing up and down, this little thing that will tell you it's brewing. It'll tell you it's fermenting. And then it'll stop around between day 5 and day 7, but it'll still be fermenting. It'll just be littler bubbles that won't make much of a noticeable bobbing up and down or bubbling or anything. And then probably about day 14, or you could even go longer just to be on the safe side, then you'll know for sure it's pretty much done. I don't actually have a hydrometer, which is a way to actually tell the volume or gravity rather of the beer to make sure that it's completely stopped. But I just kind of go by feel, like just wait a certain amount of time and then then I do my bottling. Okay, so I'm just going to put this beer in the corner of my room in a little container, just in case it overflows through the top, because that can happen. Like if there's rapid fermentation, a lot of the bubbles and foam can go up actually through the airlock and then overflow, and you don't want it going all over the floor. So that typically only happens when you add a lot of yeast and it's warmer temperature. So I feel this is actually a little bit warm, but we'll see. But that's not the end of the world if that happens. You just have to clean up the mess once it's gone through its rapid fermenting cycle. But if you put it in this container, it will just flow down the sides into here and catch in the bottom. So it's just a trick of the trade, just to make your life a little easier. Now we wait. I will be doing an update in a little bit once it starts fermenting. Okay, so it's been a few hours, just about, and it's already fermenting. So as you can see, there are little bubbles coming up from the bottom where the yeast is consuming the sugars, the liquid, and the gas is rising and escaping through this airlock. And now we wait. I will give you an update probably in about another week. See if it's almost done, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so it's been about 5 days now, and as you can see, the airlock isn't bubbling anymore. But there are still tiny bubbles coming up. So it means it's still fermenting, but it's just not fermenting as rapidly. So it actually slowed quite a bit down a few days ago, but that's normal. But this should be... Oh, I just saw it bubble. Okay, so it is bubbling a little bit. It's very slow. But I'm going to wait at least another week before I'm calling this done. Probably around the 2-week mark is when it'll be pretty much safe to say it's completely stopped fermenting. And you want it to be like completely stopped before you bottle, otherwise you can have your bottles explode on you, which can be kind of dangerous. Luckily I've never had that happen to me before, but it's always good to be on the safe side and just make sure it's completely stopped. So 2 weeks total, then I'll probably be ready to bottle and take it from there. Alright, this is day 7. So I started this 1 week ago today, and still bubbling a bit. Still very slow. Brew has actually gotten very dark. It's going to be a very dark, kind of amber kind of a beer, which is good, but I think a lot of that has to do with the ingredients I put in, like the barley malt and the dark honey. So I'll check back with you in another week. So it's been exactly 2 weeks since I started making this beer, and it's still fermenting. Still little bubbles coming up here and there. So I'm gonna wait another week just so it's completely stopped. And I'll check back with you in another week. Okay, it's been 3 weeks to the day since I started, and I'm calling this done. Looks like the fermentation has completely stopped. And now I'm going to be transferring it into this bowl, filtering it through a cheesecloth. It's actually a nut milk bag, but I actually prefer to use a nut milk bag because it's easier to handle. So I'm going to be straining out all this all this debris, all this hops and yeast and all that kind of stuff, and then I'll be left with the beer. Okay, so it's important to wash your hands first, which I already did. Try to be as sanitary as possible. It's just a matter of taking this off. There we go. This side. Oh, this smells good, alright. Smells like a nice pale ale. So now, just kind of open up this bag, kind of filter it through. Okay. There's our beer. So it's pretty cloudy right now, because there's still a lot of sediment that got through the fabric. But if you let this sit for a while, like ideally you would put it back in this fermenter and wait till the sediment reaches the bottom, but you don't have to do that. This means this will settle in the bottom of your bottles, and that's okay. Just means you get a little bit of sediment in your drink, but you don't have to actually drink the whole thing. But this is actually pretty good for you, I think. So I guess I will be doing a taste test right now. See how it tastes. Okay. Well, cheers. Oh yeah. That's good. That's one of the better beers I've made. Definitely strong hop notes. I would call this a pale ale for sure. Yeah, this is drinkable. This is like, I could actually finish this whole glass, no problem. Okay, so it looks like we're ready to bottle now. Okay, so now I'm going to bottle it up. So that fermenter makes 4 liters of beer. So I got 8 500 milliliter bottles equal to 4 liters. So that should be roughly the amount. I might have one bottle with a little bit less, because it could have been not exactly to the line basically. And you'll need a funnel, measuring cup that you can easily pour with, and of course beer. But also I'm going to be using these carbonation drops. They're basically like hard candies almost, but they're basically just sugar that you add to your bottles, like 1 per bottle, so that your beer can become carbonated with all the foam and stuff. Otherwise you can just drink it flat, but that's okay if you want to drink it flat. I've drank flat beer, my own flat beer many times, and It's actually the way it was traditionally made way back in the day. It's all flat. But it's up to you whether or not you want to do that or not. Just keep in mind it takes a while for it to become carbonated. I'll just take the bottle, the funnel. Sure, no debris on this thing. Oh yeah. Pour it in there. It'll spill a little bit on the sides, but that's okay. You can always clean it up later. Okay. Actually, I'll add these after I'm all done. This side. Number 2. Okay, this one isn't completely full, so I'm just going to drink this one. The other ones are full, so let me clean this up first. So I'm just going to add one of these carbonation drops each bottle. Side. Know which one you got. This will take a while. Maybe a good few weeks at least for it to be completely carbonated. And you're not going to want to store this in the fridge because it doesn't. It's the fermentation that causes carbonation. And fermentation is significantly slowed down in the fridge. So keep these somewhere warm, I guess. Not too warm, but. So now you just close the tops. Oh, this one. Okay, there we go. There. And that is how you make beer the easy way. I hope you found this video helpful or useful in some way. This is definitely one of the easier ways to go about making beer. And a good beer at that. It's not like what you'd get at a microbrewery or anything like that, but it's a decent drinkable beer. That's probably the simplest method to make, other than going through a little bit of a mess sometimes, but other than that, that is basically how it's done. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video, and until next time, Happy brewing!